They clapped when the chairwoman read the vote, and the North Rock lawyer looked like he'd swallowed a thumbtack. The old church hall buzzed with storm-belly air. I kept my cap in my hands. Walt squeezed my shoulder. 5 rows back, my son Andrew stared through me, jaw-tight blotches climbing his cheeks. The chairwoman said it again for the reporter in the denim jacket motion carries. Access denied. That was the public part. The private hurt started 2 months earlier. I'm Frank Dalton Hawkeye to a few men who knew me when I kept different hours. 70, widower, 60 acres south of Pine County's fairgrounds. Mornings I feed the hens, walk the fence, and drink from a chipped mug Maggie bought at the Methodist rummage sale the year before she passed. If you listen before sunup, you can hear the long whistle from the river bridge. Andrew rolled in on a Thursday, city slick suit, rental car smell, grin tuned for selling. Dad, he said, flipping a manila folder onto the kitchen table. I took a look at your taxes. You're leaving money on the table. Ag exemptions, reassessment. We can lock in a better rate. I printed everything. Coffee, I asked. He checked his watch. Wish I could. I've got a call in an hour. If we sign, the county can reclassify part of the acreage and freeze the assessment. It's routine. My firm cleaned up the language. I should have read every line. Men like me say that a lot, always a day too late. Instead, I saw what I wanted to see: concern. Pride will wreck a man faster than whiskey. We sat at the table where Maggie graded spelling tests. Dust hung in the window light. Andrew laid out 3 documents. My parcel number. My name in neat blocks. Terms I half knew, which is worse than not knowing. This one authorizes me to talk to the county, he said, tapping. This one's the exemption petition, and this one lets me sign follow-ups so you don't have to drive into town every time they blink. You don't have to do this, I said. He smiled the old boyhood smile. It's what sons do. I signed. He stamped the papers with a notary seal he carried like a magician's coin, kissed my cheek, and left in a spray of gravel. His taillights blinked once at the end of the lane. A week later, a thick envelope arrived, 2 mountain peaks on the letterhead, North Rock Holdings Hospitality Division. It thanked me for my cooperation and congratulated me on the successful execution of transfer documents necessary for the forthcoming development. I drove to the courthouse before lunch. The clerk's silver hair, stern kindness, pulled the records. Mr. Dalton, she said, your agent recorded an instrument granting North Rock a right to acquire and access. There's also a limited power of attorney. My agent, I said, rolling the words like a pebble with a sharp edge. She made copies. I read in a plastic chair under humming lights. They hadn't taken the deed yet, but they'd grabbed what matters most when you're trying to build anything out here, the way in and the way out. The east strip, 30 feet of gravel, squeezed between my fence and Keaton's pasture. It floods in spring and bakes by July. Without a clean right-of-way, every glossy plan is just paper pretending to be a promise. I called Andrew on the courthouse steps. He answered on the second ring. Dad, I'm about to jump on. What did you sign? A pause. We moved some things along. This is good. They'll handle drainage roads. Jobs, Dad? You can keep the house. This is money you can use while you're still young enough to enjoy it. You sold them my front door. That's dramatic. It's preliminary. When the deal closes, you'll be set. They just need access for surveys. He lowered his voice. This is how grown-up deals work. Did your firm pay you for this, son? That's insulting, he snapped. I did this for you. Across the square, the diner's neon open flickered the way it always had. I could hear Maggie's laugh if I let myself. I swallowed. I'm going to unwind it. You can't. It's recorded. I've unwound worse. He sighed, big city weary. Don't embarrass yourself at the county. Let the professionals handle it. I hung up before the anger turned into something Maggie wouldn't recognize. On the drive home, heat puddled in the low spots. A red tail rode a spiral over the south field. I parked at the lane and let the engine tick itself quiet. The creek ran low stones slick with green. I walked the east strip and listened. Land talks to a man who shuts up long enough. It tells where water sits after the sky moves on, where roots knit the bank, where ground lies to surveyors in a dry week and tells the truth in a wet one. Walt showed up at dusk with a six-pack and the look he wore when a plan wasn't formed yet, but resolve was. Heard you were in town making friends, he said. Word travels. Faster than sense. I signed it, I said. He popped 2 caps against his bumper and handed me a bottle. Then you'll unsign it. We've read uglier maps. We stood under a pink-washed sky while frogs tuned up in the ditch. Tidy tire tracks cut along my pasture. North Rock had already sent a scout to gawk at what they thought they owned. A candy wrapper flashed by the fence post. Small disrespect will sour a man faster than a shouted insult. I need records, I said. Everything they filed, everything they plan. And I need to know who controls that sliver between us and Keaton's. If there's an old emergency access easement from the 70s that never got shut, I want it in my hands. Walt clinked his bottle. Tomorrow we read. That night I lay awake counting slow breaths the way I taught myself decades ago when fear was just another loud roommate. The radiator ticked. A moth thumped the screen. The dog dreamed at my feet. I saw Andrew at 6 with jam on his chin, proud of an A. I saw him now, edges and angles, talking about grown-up deals. Pride, I told the ceiling, will wreck a man faster than whiskey. In the morning we moved slow. At first light, Walt and I drove into town in his dented Ford thermoses, rattling the old dashboard, Jesus, nodding like he agreed with the plan. The courthouse opened at 8. Pine County smells like floor wax and old paper in the morning, same as it did when Maggie and I got our marriage license. We signed the visitor log, tipped our caps to the deputy, and found the clerk with the stern kindness who'd handed me copies the day before. Back again, Mr. Dalton, she said. Yes, ma'am. I need to see every instrument North Rock recorded touching my parcel and anything within 100 feet of the east boundary. If there's an emergency access easement from the 70s, I want to know where it sleeps. She pursed her lips like she was tasting the word easement. We'll start with the grantor-grantee index. She set a heavy book on the counter, cracked leather corners gone. Could take a while. I brought a lunch, I said. Walt traced the columns with a thick finger. Names, dates, book and page references. We worked quiet the way we did in places you don't talk loud. Every so often he read a number and I wrote it down. After an hour, the clerk brought us the first pull of plat from 1974, handwritten notes in blue ink lines spidering across the page, like somebody's patient idea of order. A narrow strip marked temporary emergency access, voluntary cooperation between Dalton and Keaton for fire suppression. No signature ending it, no expiration either. Temporary is where lawyers make rent, Walt muttered. Voluntary cooperation, I said. But it existed. That's something. We copied everything, paid cash, and drove 2 blocks to the diner. The bell above the door rang high. Coffee smell steadied me like a hand on the back. Mabel was at the corner table in her seed company ball cap, a stack of beekeeper journals by her elbow. She waved us over without asking what had put thunder in our faces. Morning, sinners, she said. You look like boys who found half a map and think it's a treasure. We found the ghost of a road, I said, spreading the plat. Fire access from the 70s. No recorded end. North Rock's lawyer rattled the county with a right to acquire and access. But their clean path runs through this sliver. I figure if the sliver isn't theirs, their timeline starts leaking. Mabel took a slow sip. Keaton's got 2 sons fighting over that pasture and an ex-daughter-in-law who knows how to sharpen a checkbook. If you want clean anything from that family, bring rain and prayer. You hear any chatter about surveyors? Walt asked. She tilted her head toward the window. Couple fellas with neon vests were in here yesterday, asking where to find decent tires after they bent a rim on the old county lane. Said they were headed back out today if the clouds hold. Clouds won't, I said, glancing at the sky. A band of gray sat on the horizon like a promise. We finished eggs and left bills under the salt shaker. In the truck, I pulled the dog-eared folder of forms I'd printed at midnight. The Sunshine Law request wasn't fancy, just plain words asking for copies of permits, drainage plans, access agreements, in every email between the county and North Rock touching my parcel. I addressed one to the county planner, one to the road and bridge supervisor, and one to the environmental health office. I've learned the only way to make big outfits behave decent is to make them show their paper. At the planning office, a young man with a beard that tried too hard told me they were moving quickly to streamline. I smiled like a grandpa at a school play and handed him the request. I bet you are. That's why I'm asking for the streamlining in writing. Walt signed his too. You don't need to look tough if you look like you mean it. By noon, gray slid in over the courthouse square, and the flag snapped hard. We headed east down the county lane to walk the sliver. The gravel gave way to dirt, and the dirt gave way to that old clay that bakes like brick by July, but breaks your axle in April. I stepped off the right-of-way from the stake to the fence post, 30 feet, give or take a boot. The creek was low enough to whisper, but its banks were scarred from spring. Roots showed like knuckles. A kingfisher flashed down the ribbon and scolded us for staring. Water sits here after a hard rain, I said. You can see the silt line. If you try to crown a road without French drains and fabric, your base will swim. And there's nowhere for the runoff to go without jumping that bank onto Keaton's pasture. Walt Crouch felt the clay. And if you do it right, it costs someone real money they didn't budget. Near the road, a rickety gate leaned like it wanted to lie down. A rusted sign read, "No trespassing," in a font that belonged to a different sheriff. I took a picture. We're not stepping past that line today, I said. We don't need to. Everything that matters is visible from where the law lets us stand. The survey crew rolled up late a white pickup with magnetic logos and a GPS mast in the bed. 2 young men climbed out serious about their neon. One nodded. Afternoon. Afternoon, I said. You boys find your tires. They laughed. Diner lady told you, huh? We're good now. Careful near the bank, I said. She undercuts after a storm. We'll be fine, the taller one said, setting a tripod. We're just collecting points. That's what I used to do, I said. Collect points. They didn't ask. We stayed on the public side of the fence and watched them shoot the line. The sky dimmed, wind pushing heat into the ditch like a broom. When the first fat drops hit, I could smell dirt waking up. There's a sound before good rain leaves, Titan birds go quiet, and the air gets that penny taste at the back of your tongue. The kingfisher vanished. The young men hurried, shoulders tucked, and loaded up. See you in town, one called. You will, I said. Back home, I made calls. I got the Keaton voicemail and left a message. This is Frank Dalton. I've got a question about the strip on our border. Would appreciate a call back. Then I called Brenda at the title company. She's got a filing brain and a pastor's patience. Find me the current owner of the East 30, I said. If it's still Keaton, tell me if there's any recorded right of first refusal attached to the south parcel from back when his daddy and I swapped fence lines. Give me until tomorrow, she said. It'll cost you pie. Cherry, I said. 2 if you find the refusal. Evening brought the kind of rain that fattens corn and ruins wedding tents. I pulled Maggie's map from the pantry, hand-drawn landmarks, the kind of careful my wife loved. Old hedgerows, the place the church picnic used to set up before the tornado took the poplars. She'd traced the creek like a seamstress, running a finger down folded cloth. I followed the blue line and pictured men in boardrooms who thought contour was a word you used about makeup. Pride will wreck a man faster than whiskey, but arrogance builds a higher scaffold to fall from. After supper, the phone buzzed. Brenda. You owe me pie, she said. 2 pieces. Keaton's strip is still Keaton's. And buried in a 1983 boundary adjustment is a right of first refusal for access easements crossing that strip in favor of the south parcel. That's you, Frank. It says any proposed grant of a new right-of-way must be offered first to the southern adjoining owner on substantially similar terms. I sat down. The dog looked up like I'd said something holy. So if North Rock tries to buy a clean road, I get the first bite. Exactly, she said, and I don't see any recorded waiver. Brenda, I said, cherry and pecan. I called Walt. He whooped so loud I held the phone away. That's the gate key, he said. Not to open, but to keep shut. Not shut, I said. Just honest. We drove back into town for the evening council meeting, because that's what you do when trouble comes dressed in a suit. Mabel spoke about bees and how pesticide drift from resort landscaping had wiped out 2 hives in the next county. The road supervisor explained how a heavy rain like this eats shoulders unless you lay fabric and build drainage right. I didn't wave a flag or raise my voice. When they called my name, I stepped to the microphone and told them plain a right of first refusal sits on the only practical access. I intend to exercise it if anyone tries to buy that strip, and I will record it tomorrow. If North Rock wants to build here, they'll have to do it the long way through process, not shortcuts. The reporter in denim scratched fast. Andrew wasn't there. Maybe he thought this part was beneath him. The chairwoman nodded and asked the planner to include the new information in the file. On the walk out, the rain hit the tin awning hard enough to drown a man's doubts. Walt grinned under his cap. Tomorrow we make it real. Tomorrow, I said, the words settling warm in my chest like a good swallow of coffee. We read the paper to the paper, and then we buy what they thought they could buy without asking. We were at the recorder's office when the doors unlocked. I wore my good hat because paper respects a man who looks like he respects himself. Brenda met us with a folder fat enough to be a sermon. Deed notices on top, she said, tapping the stack. Your right of first refusal affidavit underneath. I drafted a short statement you can read into the record so there's no ambiguity. We signed where yellow flags told us and slid the documents across the counter to the clerk. The date stamp thumped like a heartbeat. Book and page numbers landed in blue ink, permanent as winter. A kid with a nose ring ran the copies and passed them back like communion. Walt gave me a nudge. Now it exists in the way that counts, he said. Not just in memories and dusty maps. I mailed certified letters the same hour, one to North Rock's Council of Record 1, to the county planner, one to Keaton, and one to myself because Maggie used to say, always send a letter to the man in the mirror. I kept the green receipts in my breast pocket where I used to keep a compass. Outside, the rain had wrung itself out and left the square smelling like wet coin and fresh tar. Trucks hissed by tires lifting steam. Next stop was the Land Trust office. Not the big glossy one that prints calendars with elk and snow. The small storefront wedged between a thrift shop and a barber who still uses talc. The director, a woman named Carol with river hair and pin-sharp eyes, listened without typing, while I laid out the creek, the kingfisher, the spring floods, and the way North Rock's plans would push lawn chemicals downhill like gossip. You want to put a conservation overlay on the riparian strip, she said, more statement than question. If it fits, I said. I'm not trying to freeze the whole county in amber. I'm trying to keep the creek honest. She pulled a laminated map and ran a finger along blue squiggles. State habitat maps call that segment priority for aquatic passage. You've got bank swallow cavities and freshwater mussels down there. We can't stop lawful building, but we can insist on buffers and seasonal restrictions if they trip certain thresholds. It's all process. Process is a friend if you learn to breathe slow, I said. She smiled. You sound like my grandfather. She slid a brochure across the desk. File this notice of interest with planning. It doesn't grant you power. It reminds them they already have it. On our way out, Walt pointed at a bulletin board flyer. Community Open House proposed North Rock Resort Tuesday, 6 p.m. Church Fellowship Hall. They're coming to sell sunshine and free brunch, he said. Let's bring clouds and questions, I said. We drove the access strip again after lunch. The creek clung to its banks, heavier now, brown with a day's worth of impatient soil. I crouched and pinched clay between finger and thumb. It held print like a memory and then slumped. You build a road here wrong, and the first August thunderhead will put it at the bottom of Keaton's pasture, I said. Which is why they'll want to buy more width, Walt added. And why they can't if you exercise your refusal? Not won't, I said. Can't without asking me first. And when they ask, I'll buy what they offer. By mid-afternoon, the sunshine responses began to twitch to life. The first was a polite email from the planner acknowledging receipt and promising prompt, reasonable compliance. The second landed from Road and Bridge, a spreadsheet of load ratings, a PDF of standard driveway apron specs, and a note that any commercial access onto a county lane must meet Section 6.14, including improved shoulders, culvert upgrades, and documented site distances. I read it twice and felt something in my shoulders unwind. If you want to stop a train, you don't run at it. You make it climb a hill. I took coffee on the porch and dialed Andrew. It rang longer than it used to before he picked up. Dad, I'm headed into a client, make it quick. I recorded the refusal, I said. The what, Matonom? Right of first refusal on the east 30 feet. 1983 boundary adjustment. Brenda found it. It's live. If North Rock or anyone tries to buy access there, I get the first offer on the same terms and may take it. Silence. I heard HVAC whoosh in the click of a pen. Dad, that's not how these developments work. They have multiple access options. They have one that carriers will insure and fire trucks will trust, and it runs over the old fire strip. If they go anywhere else, they carve wetland or shave rock, and both eat money. You're out of your depth, he said, crisp and practiced. I've been in rooms where these things get decided. You haven't. I've been in rooms where the people leaving the room were the ones who lost, I said. Different uniform, same human beings. Tell your friends at North Rock the gate isn't open. I can't believe you'd sabotage. I'm following the rules you love, I said and hung up before my voice frayed. The next day, the survey truck was back with a third man who looked like a supervisor, the kind who smiles for problems because problems are billable. He waved from the cab and hopped out. Name's Theo, he said, sticking a hand through the fence. We're trying to map this line accurately so we don't trespass while we shoot it. Good habit, I said, shaking his hand. Be careful near the bend. Undercut got worse. He squinted at the bank. You folks get much more of this hard to tell with the clay. Clay remembers, I said. She holds you up until she doesn't. They set up prisms. I set up a lawn chair in the lawful dirt and read the road spec again, while clouds shouldered together overhead. A hawk hung on a nail of wind and then drifted toward the fairgrounds. My phone buzzed with one more sunshine reply, environmental health wanting to schedule a site visit to review any proposed septic or wastewater plans. I wrote back cheerfully, happy to meet you. I can show you where the creek jumps the bank in a 5-year rain. By late afternoon, a white SUV with county seal stenciled on the door rolled in road supervisor name tag reading C. Ruiz. She stepped out in steel toes and a posture that meant she'd had to prove herself 3 times for everything once. Mr. Dalton, she said. Yes, ma'am. I got your request in the Section 614 site. If any applicant wants commercial access here, they'll need shoulders ditching and a culvert upgrade at minimum. That bank is rotten. You know that. I do. She eyed the sliver, then the creek, then the way the crown would have to sit to shed water without sacrificing sight distance. This is not a driveway, she said. This is a math problem. Which makes it a money problem, I said. She smiled. You're not wrong. Also, our emergency services chief is going to want a turning template for ladder trucks if anyone pretends the east approach is adequate. Where do I send Pi? I asked. She laughed. Send your observations in writing. Pi persuades my husband, not my file. When she left, Theo wandered over professional courtesy, leaning against professional caution. You're not making this easy, he said, almost admiring. I'm making it correct, I said. That's different from easy. 2 evenings later, the county posted the open house agenda online. I printed it and slid it under a magnet shaped like a rooster. North Rock would bring renderings and pastries. The planning staff would explain process. Public comment at the end. Walt called and said Mabel had recruited 3 other beekeepers and a high school biology teacher who knows more about bank swallows than most people know about their own cousins. It's going to be polite, Walt said, but not comfortable. Good, I said. The mail brought green cards proof my letters had landed. The one to North Rock came back signed by a name I recognized from a glossy brochure, Vice President Community Integration. I laughed out loud at the title and put the card next to Maggie's mug. That night I walked the fence in the last light. Fireflies blinked along the ditch like slow Morse. The air after rain carries a sweetness you don't taste when you're young and in a hurry. I stopped at the old gate and looked at the sliver that had turned into a lever. You can push a boulder with a plank if you set your fulcrum right and you're patient about the push. On Sunday, the church bulletin announced Tuesday's meeting and asked for grace and neighborliness. On Monday afternoon, my phone vibrated with a number I didn't know. This is Claire from North Rock, a woman said, smooth as a showroom. We received your letter and would love to set a time to discuss a mutually beneficial arrangement. I'll be at the fellowship hall tomorrow at 6, I said. We can discuss it in front of my neighbors. It beat. We prefer to resolve access questions privately. That's how I got here, I said, privately. The rain started again, soft enough to make the porch roof sing. I poured black coffee and wrote 3 note cards for myself. First, Section 614 requirements. 2, right of first refusal recorded book and page. 3, creek bank undercut and bank swallow cavities. Underneath, I wrote in Maggie's looping hand, because I could still see it, 2 words I needed to remember. Go slow. Tuesday was coming, so were the pastries. We'd bring paper. By 5:30, the church lot was full enough that folks were parking in the grass and careful about ruts. The fellowship hall smelled like coffee floor cleaner and 100 potlucks. Fold-out tables lined the walls with foam boards propped on easels renderings of glassy cabins and a boardwalk that belonged on a travel channel, not on our clay. A catering tray of pastries sweated under plastic. A banner read, Welcome Neighbors, in a font that smiled too hard. Walt and I took seats halfway up. Mabel sat with 2 women in bee caps and a young man with a biology textbook tucked under his arm. The road supervisor, Ruiz, stood near the back with a clipboard. Carol from the land trust hovered by the maps, not touching anything, eyes taking notes without a pen. The reporter in the denim jacket eased along the side aisle like a man who's learned to listen for the sentence that changes a room. At 6 sharp, the planner banged a gavel he must have borrowed from the courthouse. Open house format first, he said, cheerful, in the way of people who believe process will save them. North Rock will present a concept and answer questions at their stations. At 7, we'll convene for public comment. Heads nodded. A few kids in ball caps grabbed donuts and looked for an exit. A woman I recognized from the Monday call, Claire, took the mic. She wore the precise smile of a flight attendant in mild turbulence. We are so excited about the potential to bring sustainable, family-friendly hospitality to Pine County, she said. Our vision centers on conservation and community, with improvements to local roads and employment opportunities for residents. We are committed to being good neighbors. She introduced a man with hair like a commercial for itself, project director, and a civil engineer whose polo had the company logo stitched over the left pocket. They waved fancy words over the foam boards, green roofs, bioswales, native plantings, interpretive signage, tax base enhancement. They mentioned a preliminary access alignment without naming a direction and called our creek a water feature. Every time someone asked about traffic, the engineer said a study would be forthcoming. Every time someone asked about pesticides, Claire said they'd adhere to best practices. I waited. There's an art to letting a rope pay out before you pull. At 7, the chairs turned toward the makeshift dais. The planner smiled too wide. We'll open the floor. Please keep comments to 2 minutes. We're here to listen. A retired teacher spoke first about quiet nights and stars you can actually see. A mechanic mentioned he'd fixed 3 bent rims on that county lane this week and didn't need 100 more. Mabel stepped up and introduced herself the way church people do, by the pies they bring to funerals and who they babysat in 1998. Then she put on the beekeeper's voice. When resorts plant ornamentals from catalogs and spray the way city folks spray our bees die, she said. Not all at once. Quiet and then gone. If you're serious about being neighbors, show me a planting list and a binding agreement. She set 2 jars of honey on the table like evidence. This is what you'll lose if you don't mean what you say. The high school kid followed, reading nimble but sure from a page about bank swallows and how undercuts make holes that are homes, not features. The room murmured the way a congregation does when truth steps into the aisle. Walt leaned in. You next, he said. I shook my head. Not yet. Halfway through, a familiar shape slid into the back Andrew suit beside him, phone silent in his palm. He had the look he gets when he's already decided where the meeting ends. Our eyes met for a blink and didn't hold. When it was my turn, I stood and walked slow because my knees have earned it. My name is Frank Dalton, I said into the little metal mesh that carries voices. I live on the south parcel you folks colored in green because it photographs nice. I've listened. Now I want you to listen. I held up a letter. On file with the county as of Wednesday morning is my affidavit recording a right of first refusal on the east 30 feet, the only practical access that keeps your trucks off wetlands and your ladders out of a ditch. Book and page are on this copy, which I will hand to the planner. I set it on the table. If anyone seeks to purchase a right-of-way across that strip, the law says I get it first on the same terms. A quiet fell heavy and clean. It's the sound a room makes when the game changes. I continued. Road and Bridge Section 614 requires shoulders ditching culvert upgrades and verified site distances for any commercial access onto that lane. Emergency services will want turning templates. Environmental health wants to see wastewater plans before they bless any shovels. I pointed at the board that called the creek a feature. And that's not a feature. That's a living thing that floods twice a decade and undercuts like a habitual sin. A man in a blazer I didn't recognize started to rise with the sort of objection you learn in seminar rooms. The chairwoman lifted a hand and said, "Let him finish." I loved her for that. I'm not here to yell, I said. I'm here to say we do this by the book, in rooms with minutes and microphones, not side deals and paper that shows up in your mailbox after supper. You can sell pastries or you can sell process. Tonight we pick. I stepped back. For a moment, the only sound was the HVAC whisper. Claire slid to the microphone, smile steady. We appreciate Mr. Dalton's passion, and we will, of course, comply with all local requirements. Our team has identified multiple access options. Name one that doesn't cross floodplain or rock, someone said from the back. She didn't. Andrew came forward, then lips pressed white. My father is a good man, he began, which is a sentence that always means the speaker is about to say something that argues otherwise. He is also out of his depth navigating modern development. North Rock has acted in good faith under instruments that are entirely lawful. The community will benefit. My father will benefit. It's a strange thing to feel your heart break on a timetable. I didn't look at him. I looked at Carol, who raised a hand. Land trust, she said for the record. We filed a notice of interest with planning regarding riparian buffers and seasonal restrictions for bank swallow nesting. We're not here to stop any lawful build. We're here to make sure it happens where and how the statutes already say it must. Mr. Dalton's filing clarifies the access picture. Given that we recommend a site inspection before any further scheduling, Rui stepped up like she'd been waiting for the invitation. Road and Bridge agrees. Section 6.14 triggers the requirements he mentioned. I'd like to walk the strip with survey fire and environmental health and mark the spots where a turning radius becomes fiction. Thursday morning works for my crew. She looked at Claire. You'll want to be there. Claire nodded, professional grace dimming a watt. Of course. The reporter's pen scratched faster. The planner conferred with the chairwoman and then tapped the mic. We'll schedule a site inspection open to parties of interest. Public can attend from the road shoulder. Time and place will be posted. I felt Walt's hand on my shoulder again, steady as the old oak behind the barn. Andrew was watching me the way a son watches a father who has turned into a witness he cannot impeach. There was no victory in it, only the truth of a long day. Afterward, people clustered. Some hugged. Some asked good questions. Claire approached with the vice president of community integration. He wore the title like a lapel pin you're supposed to notice. Mr. Dalton, she said softly, we'd still prefer to resolve access privately. And I'd prefer my wife wasn't buried on the hill, I said. We don't get everything we prefer. Andrew waited until the room thinned. Dad, he said, quieter now. Can we talk outside? We stepped into the warm air. Lightning twitched on the far ridge. The smell of wet leaves rose from the grass. You blindsided me, he said. You mailed me papers with other people's names on what I built, I said. We can retire blindsides for the week. He worked his jaw. They'll walk around you. There's always a way. Sometimes the way is where it should be, I said. Sometimes it isn't. Thursday, he said, you'll see. You've overplayed your hand. Thursday, I said, you'll see what 30 feet means to a ladder truck. He stared past me into the hall's yellow squares of light, then nodded like a man ending a deposition. I'll be there. So will the creek, I said. The chairwoman came out, tucking the gavel into her tote. Mr. Dalton, she said, we'll meet at the East Strip at 9. Bring boots. I've got boots older than some of those foam boards, I said. Walt chuckled. The reporter in denim lifted his camera and caught Claire mid-blink. Thunder stitched the ridge. The hall lights went off one by one, and the night gathered itself around us like a cloak. Thursday would be mud. Good. Mud tells the truth. Thursday came in low and gray, the kind of sky that presses sound down where you can hear it. I parked the truck by the county lane at 8:45 and pulled on boots that had known better years. Walt rolled in behind me. Ruiz arrived in the county SUV with 2 inspectors, one carrying a wheel for measuring distance. A fire engine from Station 3 eased up last chrome dole with road film. The chief climbed down broad like a refrigerator and moving with the caution of men who carry other people's bad days. His name tag said H. Morris. North Rock showed in a convoy the white pickup with the GPS mast, a Suburban with Claire the hair ad man and their civil engineer, and a rented box truck with orange cones and borrowed confidence. Andrew came alone in a sedan that looked leased and worried. The reporter in denim set up by the ditch lens hood spotted with mist. Carol from the Land Trust tucked a map under her arm. Mabel handed out cheap ponchos from a bin like communion wafers for sinners who hadn't planned ahead. Ruiz gathered us by the leaning gate. Here's how this goes, she said. We're verifying the conditions on the ground. We're not litigating policy. We'll mark site distances and turning templates. Environmental health will flag bank conditions. Stay on the public side of the fence unless invited. We'll be brief because the sky won't be. She nodded at the inspector with the wheel. He clicked off distances to the first curve. Morris swung a piece of plastic that looked like a fisherman's bad dream, a turning template. He laid it on the gravel like a shadow of a ladder truck, then stepped it through the approach, counting under his breath. The engineer stepped up with a tablet and a smile that tried to get ahead of facts. "Chief," he said, with a slight widening, "here in a cut into that inside bank we can make your swing. Our model shows." Morris put a boot on the line and shook his head. "Your model didn't stand here last spring when the bank let go," he said. "You're assuming soil that isn't. You're assuming tires that don't slide. And you're assuming we can lose a foot on each side to mud and still not take a mirror off. My people drive this lane in rain at night, lights bouncing off wet sycamores. Show me 3 feet beyond your pretty line and we'll talk." Ruiz marked with orange paint here and here and here. The inspector with the wheel called out, 220 to crest, 180 to curve. Sight distance is marginal and wet. Environmental health crouched at the bend, pushing a probe into the bank until it disappeared like a spoon in pudding. "Undercut existing," she said. "Banks swallow cavities. Active." She set 3 little flags the color of butter. "Seasonal restrictions apply if disturbed." Claire's smile thinned. "We have no intention of disturbing critical habitat," she said. "We'll design around." "Design around means move your centerline," Ruiz said, chalk snapping in her fingers. "Move your centerline means your crown goes where water already chose to go. Then your shoulder's a soup bowl. Section 6.14 won't pass it as a commercial approach." The civil engineer shifted, tablet dimming as drizzle thickened. "We could build retaining and geogrid." "We could," "You could," Morris said. "But I have to get an 80,000-pound ladder truck around this bend with 6 inches of insurance. I'm not going to do that on hope." The survey crew set prisms and shot the angles. Theo offered a nod toward me without crossing the fence line. I nodded back. There are rules between people who measure for a living. Cars slowed as they passed drivers leaning to see. Mabel opened an umbrella that hadn't figured out it was dead and held it anyway. Carol took photos of the bank holes and the tiny beaks, peeking like punctuation from dirt. Andrew hovered by the suburban face the color of unbaked bread. He watched the chalk marks grow like a diagnosis. When he caught my eye, he tried a smile that didn't make it to his eyes. "You're enjoying this," he said. "No," I said, "but I am breathing." The engineer tried a different tack. "We're proposing a low-volume hospitality use," he said, for the notes. "Staggered arrival patterns? Shuttle service." Morris tapped the template. "Fire doesn't stagger," he said. "We arrive how we arrive." Ruiz turned to the group. "Here's my preliminary to meet section 6.14. You'd need at minimum 9 feet of shoulder beyond travel lanes on the outside of the curve, cutback on the inside culvert upgrade at the crossing, ditching, and a paved apron. Given the bank condition and habitat flags, that's not happening within the existing right-of-way. Any widening will require new rights and new review, and the turning template as shown fails." She looked at me. "Mr. Dalton, your filing is in the record." "Yes, ma'am," I said, tapping my breast pocket. "Book and page." Claire glanced at Andrew. He kept his eyes on his shoes. The hair ad man stared at the creek like it owed him an apology. Then the sky opened. Not a downpour. The kind of steady, flattening rain that turns surface into story. The gravel slicked to graphite. The clay darkened and breathed out the smell of old places. The ditch filled, and the bank began to bleed brown. The inspector stuck his probe again. It went in half a foot like he was pushing into pie. "The bank is moving," environmental health said, calm and almost tender, like she'd found a bird in a shoebox. "You build here now, you chase failure for the life of the road." Theo jogged to the truck to stash gear. He slipped near the edge and windmilled. I stepped without thinking and grabbed his elbow through chain link. We both froze, then laughed, because that's what you do when the ground reminds you it was never fully yours. "Thanks," he said, cheeks red under stubble. "Gravity thanks me more," I said. When the rain eased, Ruiz capped her can and clapped her hands once. "That's sufficient for today. Planning will circulate notes. Applicants can submit revised concepts. Fire will issue a letter on turning and clearance. Environmental will issue a memo on bank stability and seasonal restrictions. Public can view the file by request." Claire lifted her chin. "We appreciate the county's diligence," she said, voice bumping the guardrail of professional. "We remain enthusiastic about partnership." The vice president of community integration had wandered toward the suburban phone cupped against the rain. He spoke low, but the ditch is a tattletale and sound travels down water. "I don't care what the brochure says," he said to whoever paid his gas card. "If access isn't insurable without buying that strip, we don't have a pro forma." Yes, I know, unless we overpay. No, the board won't. Then we lean on the Dalton boy to get us a waiver or a back door. If not, we regroup. Paper carries, Walt said at my shoulder. It does, I said. The crew's packed up. The fire engine pulled away with a patient diesel hum. The reporter took one last photo of the butterflags, trembling like small stubborn shrews. Andrew caught up to me at the gate. Rain purled on his lashes the way it did when he was 12, and pretending not to cry after striking out. They'll find another way, he said, but there wasn't iron in it, just the echo of rooms he wanted to belong to. They might, I said, or they might read the math. This is going to cost me, he said. Do you understand that? I understand costs, I said. I carried them longer than you've had a mortgage. He swallowed, nodding like a man trying to swallow pride and finding it sticks. Back home, I toweled the dog and set coffee to perk. My phone buzzed with a text from Brenda Hurd from Title Rep North Rock, asked about pricing a purchase option on Keaton Strip. I reminded them of your refusal. Silence on the line long enough to knit a sweater. Then a second buzz from a number I didn't know. Mr. Dalton, this is Theo. Off the record, your refusal pinches the only path we can certify without a federal study. If they can't buy with, they'll recommend pause. You didn't hear it from me. I looked out at the pasture where rain stitched the ground back together. Somewhere a kingfisher scolded the day. I set the phone next to Maggie's mug and rubbed my thumb over the chip in the rim. You don't beat a storm. You stand where it can't take your feet and you wait it out. When it passes, the things that were built right are still there. That night, the reporter's article went live. The headline wasn't poetry, but it was Honest County Inspection, raises access questions for North Rock Plan. The last paragraph quoted Ruiz standards exist so that emergency vehicles can reach citizens safely. We will not bend them. It quoted me too, though I didn't remember saying it out loud. Paper should tell the truth. Andrew didn't call. Claire didn't either. Walt did. They're thinking about the exit, he said. Good, I said. Let them think in public. Tomorrow, he asked. Tomorrow we keep breathing, I said, and we send pie. 2 mornings after the inspection, the phone rang before the coffee finished. I let it buzz twice so my hands could stop shaking from sleep. Dalton, I said, voice still in its boots. Frank Clare from North Rock. Her tone had lost 3 coats of shine. We appreciate the county's time last week. After further review, our board has decided to pause engagement on the Pine County concept. Pause, I said. That a noun or a verb? A decision, she said carefully. Given access constraints and emergency standards, we no longer consider the site feasible on a timeline aligned with our capital plan. You're canceling. Silence like a cough you swallow at a funeral. We are exercising our right to withdraw prior to final application. We'll file formal notice today. Send it to planning, I said, and to Road and Bridge. They did good work. We will, she said. Mr. Dalton, for what it's worth, I meant what I said about partnership. For what it's worth, I said so did I. Process is a partnership too. It just runs on daylight. We hung up. The coffee bubbled like a small machine that remembers how to be useful. I poured black and stood at the sink while rain tapped the storm door light as coins. When the dog thumped his tail, I scratched behind his ear and told him a story about a boardroom reading the word insurable like it was a snake. By noon, the county site posted North Rock's letter. This correspondence serves as notice of withdrawal. The planner stamped received in red. The reporter in denim called before I finished my sandwich. Mr. Dalton, you have a minute. I've got 2. North Rock's out, he said. Do you want to comment? I want to thank the road people who brought chalk to a knife fight, I said. That'll write. He chuckled. It will. One more thing, my sunshine request shook loose emails between the county and council of record. Most are routine. One isn't. There's a payment memo from a development fund to a consulting LLC tied to your son. You should hear it from me before it prints. I sat. The kitchen chair creaked like an old gate. Say it plain, I said. 3 months ago, a 6-figure introduction fee cleared to an entity Andrew registered last year. The memo line says Pine County Hospitality Initial Access Coordination. If he advised you to sign with that money on the table, state bar rules care. Heat climbed my neck, slow and mean the way a bruise colors. You sure, I asked, though I knew he was. Men like him don't call with half-sick facts. I'm sure, he said. I called his firm. No comment. Print it, I said, and my voice surprised me with how even it was. But put the law in the paragraph, not just the gossip. People need to know what conflict means. I will, he said. You okay? I'm breathing, I said. That's enough for a Thursday. I hung up and walked the fence because that's what you do when the world tilts. At the east strip, the creek had settled to a brown we live with. A kingfisher launched off the low branch like a thrown jewel. The undercut looked like a grin you don't trust. I ran my palm along the fence post Maggie and I set after the tornado, 2 summers into the mortgage when money was thinner than patience. We joked about passing this post to a grandson who hadn't showed up yet. Now I tried to remember the exact sound she made when she drove staples with a little hammer. It's odd what you hold and what slips. Walt found me at the gate. You heard, he said. I heard twice, I said. Once from the company, once from the newspaper. I told him about the memo. He blew out a breath. That boy built a bridge and then sold tickets to cross it. He sold the map my hand drew, I said, and that nearly folded me. You don't have to carry his choices, Walt said. Just the field you can touch. Evening brought another call, a number with a city area code. Mr. Dalton, a woman said, crisp as starch paper. My name is Fowler. I'm an investigator with the State Disciplinary Office. We received a complaint related to a potential conflict in a transaction where an attorney may have had a financial interest adverse to a family member. We'll be requesting records from North Rock's counsel and the firm. I'm calling to let you know we'll also need any documents you have. I have copies, I said, and I have a memory. We prefer paper, she said not unkindly. You'll get both, I said. After supper, I found the manila folder Andrew had tossed on my table the day this started. I ran my thumb over the notary seal like I could rub time backward. I gathered what I'd recorded, what I'd filed, what the county had posted, and what the reporter had sent. I stacked it in order like a man building a small, useful wall. My phone lit with a text from Andrew. I need to explain. Then please, tonight. He arrived with his tie loosened, eyes raw at the edges. He stood in my kitchen like a boy who'd tracked mud in and realized the floor was his mother's favorite. It wasn't like he wrote, he said. It wasn't a bribe. It was success fee, standard. For introducing me to a company that wanted what I own, I said, and advising me to sign papers you wrote for them. I wrote them for us, he said, desperate and clean of elegance now. We could have been fine. They were going to put your name on a cabin, the Dalton cabin. We could have put money away for my kids, for your grandkids. Your grandkids don't sleep in cabins somebody else named for me, I said. They sleep where they learn their name. That's here. You don't understand the world, he said, the last refuge of men who need the world to be exactly what they told someone it was. I understand what men call a thing when it pays them, I said. You called it standard. Another man might call it a kickback. He sagged against the counter. The dog came in and sniffed his shoes, deciding he was safe enough to ignore. Andrew rubbed his eyes with the heels of his hands the way he did when algebra finally made sense. They're opening an investigation, he said, barely above a whisper. I know, I said. They could suspend me, he said. They could, I said. I poured coffee and pushed a mug toward him. Out of habit, I couldn't shake. He didn't take it. You're enjoying this, he said again. But there was no blade on it, only a boy looking for something to throw. No, I said, and the word felt like a stone set down. I would have sold my knees to keep you from this kind of lesson. He looked around the kitchen, the mug Maggie bought, the rooster magnet, the map with the blue seam of creek. I thought I was doing it for us, he said. You did it to us, I said. He flinched like a man who'd walked into a door he'd watched someone open. What happens now, he asked. Now we tell the truth, I said. In daylight, in rooms with minutes and microphones. You go talk to the people with badges and rules. You tell them everything. You stop calling it standard. You call it what it is. He nodded slow, and it was the first true thing he'd done in weeks. I'm sorry, he said, and it didn't fix anything, but it was a nail in a board that needed more than one. He left without taking the coffee. The house was quieter by one heartbeat. The reporter's story went live after 9. The headline didn't smile. North Rock withdraws. Payment to attorney's son raises ethics questions. The last paragraph quoted the disciplinary office confirming a preliminary review. In the comments under the article, neighbors argued with the kindness of people who have to see each other in the grocery line. Some said good for Frank. Some said jobs. One said paper should tell the truth. And I wondered how many copies got passed around at breakfast counters in the morning. Before bed, I stepped onto the porch. The night smelled like rain and cut hay. Across the field, a coyote yipped and the dog answered in his sleep. I thought of the line I'd written on the note card in Maggie's hand. Go slow. Tomorrow we'd go to the courthouse anyway, 'cause that's where days like this end up. The hall would be bright with bad coffee and men who think 3 minutes is more than it is. I set my hat on the peg and turned off the light. The boardroom had paused. The creek had not. Morning would come. So would the public part. They put out the metal folding chairs like they do for blood drives and bake sales. The same hall, same scuffed floor, but the air had that charged quiet I remember from jump zones. Men and women talking low, the sense that something's going to land. The agenda on the table read, acknowledgement of applicant withdrawal, consideration of riparian buffer guidance, public comment. Someone had added pie afterwards with a smiley face. Mabel, no doubt. The planner tapped the mic. Item 1, he said, voice trying not to wobble. We acknowledge receipt of North Rock's withdrawal. He held up the letter with its good pen and expensive signature. The file remains open for public inspection. There was polite applause, the kind you hear at school plays when the kid you love gets through a hard line. Ruiz stood against the wall with her clipboard and a look that said she'd already moved on to tomorrow's ditch. Carol from the land trust had maps rolled like batons. The reporter in denim had a fresh notebook. Walt squeezed my arm once and let go the way men do when they've said the essential thing so often it lives in the bone. The chairwoman nodded. Item 2, she said. Staff has prepared draft guidance on riparian buffers and seasonal restrictions consistent with state habitat maps. Carol stepped up and explained the skinny, not a new law, not a trap, just the county deciding to remember what the creek already knew. Bank swallows, mussels, where to put the lawn so it doesn't slide into February. Then the chairwoman looked down her list. Before public comment, she said we have a brief statement from the Office of Disciplinary Counsel. A woman with tidy hair and a suit that didn't care about rain stepped up. Good evening, she said. My name is Fowler. Our office confirms receipt of a complaint regarding a potential conflict related to a proposed transaction in this county. We do not discuss pending matters. We will, however, accept any documents from citizens who believe they have relevant evidence. She set a manila envelope on the table, the kind that starts clocks in rooms without windows. Thank you for your time. She sat. No drama. Just the hollow thud of process taking a seat. The chairwoman inhaled. Public comment. An old mechanic talked about brakes on wet gravel. A teacher mentioned stars and how you can tell kids where Orion sits if the sky isn't a billboard. Mabel marched up with 2 pies and a list of native plants that don't murder bees. The room loosened on her laugh. Then Andrew stood. He wasn't on the agenda. He wasn't a man who likes microphones unless they come with a backdrop. His tie was straight. His eyes were not. Madam Chair, he said, voice dry. 2 minutes. 2, she said. He looked at the table, then at me, then at the reporter's notebook, as if words printed would make them heavier or lighter. I'm Andrew Dalton, he said. I advised my father to sign documents connected to a potential development. I also received a payment related to that potential development. I told myself it was standard. I told myself it was success. It was wrong to act before I declared that interest plainly to him and to the county. I'm not here to excuse it. I'm here to put it on the record. He swallowed, and for a heartbeat he was 12 again, holding a foul ball he'd pretended was a home run. I'm cooperating with the investigation. I apologize to my father and to this community. He stepped back from the mic like it had heat. Nobody clapped. Not because it didn't matter, because the room understood the weight of a man trying to pick up something he dropped in public. The chairwoman nodded once, not unkind. Thank you, Mr. Dalton. She looked out over us. Further comment. I stood. My knees said 70. The part of me that still leaves the truck pointed out wheels ready for quick exit, said slow. I took the mic and held it like a tool I knew firm, not white-knuckled. My name is Frank, I said. I wrote my name on a deed in 1981 with a pen I bought at the hardware store because the banker's pen wouldn't sell to me. I've watched a lot of paper since. Some tells the truth. Some sells a story. I nodded toward the creek that we couldn't see but could feel under the floor. Land remembers what we forget. Water goes where water wants. A ladder truck takes the space it needs, not the space a brochure allows. Tonight I want to thank the people who made paper tell the truth. Road and bridge, planning, environmental health, the land trust, the reporter who asked for the emails, my neighbors who showed up with pies and hard questions. I looked at Andrew. I don't have a speech for my son. My voice surprised me by not breaking. But I have a door. It stays open if he tells the truth and does the work. Something in the room breathed out. Maybe me. I turned back to the dais. If we're voting on the buffer guidance, I support it. Not to stop anyone from building what they can do right. To remind us all that right matters more than quick. I sat. Walt squeezed my shoulder a benediction. Ruiz allowed herself a half smile. Carol unrolled a map with fresh color where the buffer would sit like a soft hand along the bank. The chairwoman called the vote. It passed simple as a wooden gavel and twice as clean. The reporter scribbled a sentence that would end his story. People stood. The room turned from a place where things are decided into a place where things are eaten. Mabel sliced pie with a plastic knife that had seen worse. Claire was not there. North Rock had mailed its goodbye and gone back to airports. The vice president of community integration would be in a different church basement next month, selling the same morning to a different set of faces who loved their own bank swallows. Paper travels faster than people change. Andrew waited by the door. When I stepped out, the evening light had that gold that makes every mistake look like it might one day belong to a story instead of a ledger. He put his hands in his pockets because he didn't know if I wanted them otherwise. "Dad," he said. "I heard you," I said. "I'll go see them tomorrow," he said, meaning the office with the manila envelopes and chairs that teach you how long an hour can be. "I'll tell them everything." "Good," I said. "Bring paper." He nodded. "I meant it," he said. "I'm sorry." "I know," I said. "Now be useful." It wasn't forgiveness. It was a road. We walked to the truck. Walt was already there cutting me a slice the size of a repair bill. "For champions," he said. "I didn't win," I said. "Some days not losing is the whole parade," he said. We ate in the shadow of the church while kids chased each other between cars, and someone's radio played a song that had been old when I came home with sand in my boots. The creek talked to itself the way creeks do when they've survived a plan. Later at the fence, I tacked up a board I'd planned in the shop, letters burned with Maggie's little wood burner she used for Christmas signs. "Dalton land for stewardship, not sale." I stepped back. Fireflies stitched the seam between field and dark. A hawk tilted once high and unbothered on a wind I couldn't feel but trusted. If you've listened this far, you know this isn't a story about beating a corporation or punishing a son. It's about how a man takes care with paper, with process, with neighbors, with a slow river under everything that remembers your name. If you've got a piece of ground or just a piece of your life that someone tried to sign out from under you, stand where the ground holds. Breathe. Ask for the documents. Find the bank swallows. Tell the truth into a microphone even if your voice shakes. If this meant something to you, if it reminded you of your father or your land, or a time you chose the long right way, share it with someone who needs the reminder. Leave a note so other folks can see they're not alone. If you want more stories like this, quiet ones with a hard spine, stick around. We'll keep the coffee hot and the light on the porch.